The U.S. says Trump has secured $600 billion in investment commitments, with agreements to boost defense and technology ties.
President Trump did say that the Saudis had committed to investing $600 billion into the U.S. over the next 4 years. That seems to be the figure that they've agreed to today.
$600 billion. That's the amount Saudi Arabia has pledged to invest in the U.S. But Washington wants more. $1 trillion. And this demand may trigger a geopolitical gamble with no guaranteed winner. What does the U.S. want from Saudi Arabia? In 2025, as the trade war with China pauses, the United States turns its focus to the Middle East with a clear request. Saudi Arabia must invest $1 trillion USD into the American economy. The publicly stated goal: to create jobs, boost growth, and most importantly, maintain global dominance in AI technology. Previously, Saudi Arabia's total investment in the U.S. hovered around $10 billion annually. Now, $600 billion is being discussed, with expectations of reaching a full $1 trillion. Why such urgency? Because the U.S. faces financial shortfalls, soaring debt, and a critical need to outpace China in tech. But Saudi Arabia is still tied to China. Even as the U.S. seeks stronger ties, China remains Saudi Arabia's largest customer. In 2024, China imported 1.6 million barrels of oil per day, making up 80% of total Saudi exports to China. In 2023, that trade yielded Saudi Arabia a $30 billion surplus. A lifeline against their mounting budget deficits, China's doing more than just buying oil. It's building deep strategic roots in the region, and the longer Saudi stays with China, the harder it becomes to align with America. Saudi Arabia's budget is stretched thin. Despite vast oil wealth, Saudi Arabia is quietly in financial distress. Since Q3 of 2022, it has posted consecutive budget deficits, reaching a record $15.7 billion shortfall in Q1 2025. April's oil crash only worsened matters. To stay afloat, the kingdom is issuing more debt, relying on bonds to fund operations. Meanwhile, Saudi is pouring nearly $2 trillion into domestic megaprojects, most notably NEOM, a futuristic desert city costing at least $1.5 trillion. So, where will another $1 trillion come from? The answer may be, it won't. The U.S. is running out of options. U.S. Treasury yields have surged to 4.5%, echoing levels from earlier market panics. If Washington keeps issuing bonds to fund tech ambitions, inflation could spike again, the dollar may drop, and investor confidence could collapse. That's why the U.S. is now dependent on foreign capital, especially from Saudi Arabia. Some in Washington propose creating an American sovereign wealth fund. But here's the catch. The U.S. runs twin deficits, both fiscal and trade. This means any new fund would be built on debt, and that debt brings risk, market distortions, bubbles, bad investments, and a heavier national debt burden. Who's winning the chip war? Despite fiscal hurdles, the U.S. still leads in AI chip technology, and it's using this to influence the Middle East. NVIDIA recently agreed to supply 18,000 Blackwell AI chips for a 500-megawatt data center in Saudi Arabia. The U.S. is also allowing over 1 million NVIDIA chips to be sold to the UAE through 2027. Some going to G42 in Abu Dhabi, others supporting U.S. tech operations in the region. Meanwhile, China is investing $140 billion into its chip industry, compared to America's $35 billion. China also enjoys much lower borrowing costs, just 1.9% compared to America's 4.4%. This means Beijing can spend more, faster, and cheaper, especially in semiconductors. Walmart reports a 4.5% increase in sales growth, but also warns of major price hikes due to Trump-era tariffs. The Walmart CEO says the company can no longer absorb the pressure, and American consumers, especially in red regions, will be hit hardest. Price hike warning. Walmart has just issued a warning that product prices are set to rise sharply in the near future, with the primary cause being the tariffs imposed by the Trump administration on imported goods. Although Walmart's revenue has increased by 4.5% compared to the same period last year, CEO Doug McMillon stated that the company can no longer absorb the rising costs from these tariffs. Given its massive scale and presence in nearly every region, Walmart simply cannot continue to absorb these higher costs without adjusting prices. This means consumers will be the ones bearing the burden of these changes. American consumers will face the direct consequences of these tariff policies. In particular, people living in red areas, where Walmart holds a dominant market share, will feel the impact most acutely. In these regions, Walmart is not only the most popular store, but often the only source for essential items like food, diapers, and medication. As prices for these necessities rise, residents in these areas, who often lack alternative options, will be hit the hardest. These tariffs don't just influence the price of products, they directly affect the daily lives of people who rely on Walmart for basic necessities. As a result, their standard of living is clearly impacted. In the end, consumers in these regions will be forced to pay more for the essentials, an outcome they can hardly avoid. Tariffs and the consumer impact. When people hear the word tariffs, many assume it's a tool to make other countries pay more, but the reality is quite different. Tariffs aren't costs paid by foreign nations. They're ultimately borne by American consumers. Major retailers like Walmart cannot continue absorbing all the increased costs from tariffs and are forced to raise product prices to compensate. Walmart, with its strong presence in rural areas and red regions, where support for tariff policies is often highest, will be the first place consumers feel the impact of rising prices. Essential everyday items like food, baby diapers, and medicine, products that most families depend on, will become more expensive. In these areas, Walmart isn't just a popular store. It's often the only store offering these necessities. As prices go up, residents have no choice but to accept higher costs. That's why these communities become the hardest hit by tariff policies. With no affordable alternatives available, they face growing financial pressure, increasing the burden especially on low-income families. Price pressure and the silent long-term effect. Although tariffs on some Chinese goods have been temporarily reduced to 15%, price pressures have not eased. Walmart, like many other retailers, has stated it can no longer absorb losses to maintain old prices, and as a result, it will have to raise product prices. This isn't a sudden shift. It will unfold gradually and quietly. Consumers won't notice it immediately, but over time, they'll feel the rising cost of living. Essential items like food, baby diapers, and medicine, things most families need daily, will become more expensive. In fact, these changes may occur without consumers fully understanding the cause, making them feel the impact only at the checkout. This is a long-term burden consumers will have to bear, one that will slowly strain household budgets across America, especially among low-income families. Who suffers most? And a question to ponder. So, who suffers the most from these tariffs? It's the working class, low-income earners, and especially families in rural areas where Walmart is king. They'll feel the price pressure more than anyone else. And that raises a big question. Do these policies really put American people first, as claimed? The answer might make you rethink everything. Ask yourself, is this a war over money, where the American consumer is the real loser? They're investing close to $1 billion and adding 5,000 new jobs in 2025. This move shatters rumors about plant closures and offshoring. So, what's driving GE to double down on U.S. production right now? Yes, tariffs on steel, aluminum, and components have raised costs by roughly 15 to 20%. But GE Aerospace is investing nearly $1 billion to modernize its U.S. facilities. How? By using automation, streamlining supply chains, and leveraging government support programs. More than that, the Made in America label is a strategic asset, safeguarding GE's global reputation and competitiveness. They know cost alone doesn't tell the whole story. Innovation speed, quality control, and supply chain reliability are just as critical. This commitment allows GE to respond quickly to market changes and reduce risks associated with long-distance supply chains. Local manufacturing also boosts collaboration between teams, leading to faster innovation cycles. GE understands that offshore production can introduce hidden costs, such as delays and quality issues, which can outweigh upfront savings. By investing in U.S. facilities, GE is building a more resilient and agile manufacturing network. That's why they're committing big to domestic manufacturing instead of moving offshore. While many companies chase cheaper labor in Mexico or Asia, GE is bucking that trend. They plan to hire 5,000 workers in 2025 to meet production growth and keep supply chains stable. Making products close to market cuts transport costs and delivery times and improves quality oversight. GE also benefits from a local ecosystem of suppliers, training centers, and skilled workers. This investment not only supports their operations, but helps strengthen the U.S. industrial base sustainably. In fact, by investing locally, GE contributes to a robust manufacturing hub that encourages innovation clusters and fosters industry collaboration. Higher energy costs are a challenge, but GE's modernization efforts include adopting energy-efficient technologies to help offset these expenses. This commitment underscores the company's belief that long-term sustainability outweighs short-term savings from relocating abroad. Expanding production means thousands of new jobs. Good news in regions still facing economic challenges. GE's commitment goes beyond hiring. They offer training programs to prepare workers for high-tech manufacturing. This boosts productivity and helps retain talent. Local communities tied to GE plants benefit from economic stability and growth. Keeping jobs reduces social pressures like poverty and migration. It's a clear example of corporate social responsibility in action. GE Healthcare faces about $500 million in annual losses from retaliatory tariffs. Yet, they're investing in domestic manufacturing instead of relocating overseas. Advanced tech, efficient processes, and tight supply chain control help lower long-term costs. Protecting intellectual property and being agile in the market reduces disruption risks. GE's approach is a big-picture strategy, balancing cost, reputation, and sustainability. They're facing global trade challenges head-on with smart investments. Keeping high-tech production in the U.S. protects sensitive products like aircraft engines and medical equipment. Less long-distance shipping cuts. Greenhouse gas emissions, supporting environmental goals. Domestic plants can apply stronger environmental standards. These benefits create a competitive advantage as businesses face increasing pressure on security and sustainability. In short, GE's nearly $1 billion investment and 5,000 new jobs highlight that innovation, quality, and responsibility drive today's manufacturing, not just cost-cutting. This is a powerful signal about the future of American industry, one that's worth your attention. Just 48 hours after the tariff hike was announced, Walmart, the largest retailer in the U.S., shut down multiple major distribution centers. Over 100,000 jobs were lost. What exactly is happening? A system built to perfection suddenly breaks. Walmart has long been known as America's logistics optimization machine. With hundreds of distribution centers spread across strategic states, from California to Arkansas, every pallet, every truckload is timed to the minute. Everything ran like clockwork. But a single change from Washington shattered the entire system. When the government officially imposed high tariffs on a wide range of imported goods, from electronic components to consumer products, the entire supply chain was thrown into complete uncertainty. Import costs surged by 15 to 20% within days. The result? Dozens of once profitable centers suddenly turned unprofitable. For Walmart, where profits are calculated down to the penny, that spike was unabsorbable. CEO Doug McMillon had no choice but to make an unprecedented decision: shut down multiple distribution centers across the U.S. Soaring costs, empty shelves, a market in turmoil. Rising costs were one thing, but what truly overwhelmed Walmart was the sheer volatility. Tariff rates changed too quickly. No one knew what next week would bring. All forecasting became meaningless. Walmart's finance team had to build emergency models, running through dozens of scenarios. The result, under current conditions, continuing operations would mean losing tens of millions of dollars in just one quarter. Especially in the Midwest, where goods are shipped inland from Pacific ports, domestic transport costs jumped by double digits. And the impact extended far beyond the balance sheet. Store shelves started emptying. Online orders were delayed due to halted fulfillment centers. Customers were confused, unable to purchase items they had come to rely on. And something unprecedented happened. Walmart lost control of its own supply chain. Chain reaction, satellite businesses, and communities collapse. Each Walmart distribution center isn't just a warehouse, it's a job hub for the entire region. When one site shuts down, thousands lose employment. Drivers, warehouse staff, repair workers, food service teams, packaging suppliers, all swept into the chaos. Across the country, more than 100,000 people were directly affected within just a few weeks. Towns that depended on Walmart slipped into crisis. Local revenues fell sharply. Small vendors who had exclusive deals with Walmart saw contracts frozen and faced the threat of bankruptcy. Even businesses that had just expanded their operations to serve Walmart were now forced to lay off staff or shut down machinery. This was no longer a business decision. It had become a widespread social crisis. An unexpected response: AI and localization of supply chains. But Walmart didn't sit still. Right after announcing the closures, multiple task forces were mobilized at headquarters. They began redesigning the entire supply chain with 3 core strategies. First, investing in AI. Walmart's engineers worked with machine learning experts to develop real-time monitoring systems for trade policies, from government statements to port disruptions and freight fee trends. Second, expanding domestic sourcing. Walmart proactively signed deals with U.S. manufacturers, especially in the Midwest and Southeast, to replace imported goods. Third, building a new distribution network. Instead of relying solely on mega hubs, they tested micro-fulfillment models, small flexible warehouses that can reroute goods quickly without depending on ocean freight. This marked the strongest transformation in Walmart's 60-year history. Just one policy move can force a commercial empire to stop and reevaluate everything. But more importantly, Walmart's response, restructuring, localizing, deploying AI, working with government and workers, proves one thing: in the storm, there is still a path for those willing to change.
In the past decade, President Xi Jinping has launched a purge within China's military, leading to the investigation of over 15 high-ranking generals. A key incident was the dismissal of General Li Shangfu, the former Minister of Defense, in 2023, raising concerns about the weakening of China's military. But is China's military strength really on the decline? Since 2012, President Xi Jinping has initiated an anti-corruption campaign within the People's Liberation Army, PLA. Over 15 generals have been investigated or dismissed, including General Li Shangfu. This campaign created a leadership vacuum, disrupting PLA modernization plans. The lack of strong leadership has left the army vulnerable, especially when it comes to executing long-term military strategies. This instability within the military undermines China's efforts to strengthen its global influence. The PLA's strategic cohesion suffers as internal factions struggle for power and military branches fail to cooperate. The leadership issues have affected China's ability to carry out large-scale military exercises. In October 2024, China deployed 125 warships and 75 aircraft for an exercise near Taiwan. However, the disruptions caused by the internal instability made it difficult for the PLA to coordinate effectively. The Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, reported that leadership weaknesses hindered China's military strategy, reducing combat readiness in the region. Without stable leadership, China's military exercises lack the precision needed to send a strong message to its adversaries. And with rising tensions in the Indo-Pacific, this instability presents an opportunity for countries like the United States to strengthen military partnerships in the region, thereby diminishing China's regional influence. The purges have deeply impacted the morale of Chinese soldiers, especially among mid-ranking officers. A Rand Corporation report, 2023, found that the uncertainty created by the purges has led to a loss of trust within the military. Officers fear being targeted next, leading to low morale and a lack of motivation. When morale suffers, so does the combat readiness of the military. Troops are less likely to perform at their best when they lack confidence in their leaders. The lack of leadership stability means that troops are not motivated to engage fully during training or in real combat situations. Moreover, the morale of the Chinese military has ripple effects on its overall combat efficiency. A military force that is internally divided, uncertain, and demoralized is not prepared to face a fast-paced, high-stakes battle. China's military also faces challenges in maintaining its equipment. A Type 094 nuclear submarine malfunctioned near Taiwan in 2024, revealing gaps in China's maintenance protocols. According to the Wall Street Journal, 2024. This issue, along with difficulties in keeping modern weapons up to date, shows the struggles China faces in maintaining its military hardware. The International Institute for Strategic Studies, IISS, reports that China allocates 1.4% of its defense budget to equipment maintenance, which is much lower than the 2.5% allocated by the US. This lack of investment in maintenance compromises China's ability to stay competitive in advanced military technologies. China's military challenges are having global repercussions, particularly in the South China Sea. Countries like the Philippines and Vietnam have strengthened their military ties with the United States to counter China's growing influence in the region. The U.S. Department of Defense reported that the Philippines increased joint military exercises with the U.S. from 3 in 2022 to 5 in 2024, focusing on sensitive areas like the South China Sea. Meanwhile, Vietnam signed multiple defense agreements with the U.S. starting in 2023, aiming to enhance regional security and counter China's military expansion. These developments signal that China's military weakness is pushing neighboring nations to seek closer alliances with the U.S., which in turn diminishes China's power in the region.
$514 billion. That's how much the U.S. Department of the Treasury was forced to borrow in Q2 2025 to cover the massive gap caused by China's dumping of $1.7 trillion in U.S. Treasury bonds. And what's even more alarming? The U.S. dollar lost nearly 9% of its value immediately after that retreat. China's shocking counterstrike. Overnight, what once seemed unthinkable became reality. China didn't just pull out of the U.S. bond market, it did so at lightning speed. Roughly $1.7 trillion in Treasury bonds were dumped in quick succession. This came immediately after the U.S. government ordered banking giants, J.P. Morgan and Bank of America, to withdraw from a $5 billion IPO of a leading Chinese EV battery company. The reason? National security concerns and Beijing's rapid rise in strategic technology. But the price? Too high. In just one quarter, the Treasury Department had to boost its borrowing plan to a record $514 billion, more than 4 times the original forecast. This is no longer a story of two economies. It's a full-fledged financial war. The domino effect, dollar drops, interest rates. Surged China's sudden exit from the bond market sent U.S. Treasury yields soaring, which in turn drove up borrowing costs across the board. Whether buying a house, a car, or paying tuition, Americans are now paying the highest interest rates in years. And the impact? Inflation hit 3.4% in Q1 2025, up 1.2 percentage points from the previous quarter. Rising energy and food prices are eroding the earnings of millions of households, especially low and middle-income families. Consumer confidence plunged to its lowest level since 1952, a glaring sign that fear is spreading about America's economic future. Global investors flee. It wasn't just China. Japan, Germany, and Saudi Arabia also began unloading U.S. bonds simultaneously. In total, $317 billion in U.S. assets were pulled out in just Q1, marking the largest dump since 2016. Meanwhile, Asian IPOs in the U.S. took a nosedive. The percentage of Asian firms choosing to list in the U.S. dropped from 75% to just 28% over the past 3 years. This doesn't only affect foreign firms. It undermines the global appeal of America's capital markets. At the same time, the U.S. Congress ordered giant investment firms like BlackRock and Vanguard to divest $812 billion from over 220 Chinese companies, fueling a growing sense of financial instability. China and BRICS restructure the global financial system. As the U.S. uses financial tools to exert pressure, China isn't sitting idle. Beijing has accelerated its de-dollarization strategy through several bold moves, reducing its U.S. bond holdings to $759 billion, the lowest in 9 years. Boosting its gold reserves to 2,292 tons, equivalent to 6.5% of its total FX reserves. Investing more in BRICS internal bonds and yuan-denominated assets. But that's not all. China announced it would launch its own national credit rating system by 2026, aimed at breaking away from Western agencies like Moody's and Fitch. Simultaneously, the BRICS alliance is expanding its payment system. BRICS Pay, enabling cross-border trade in local currencies. In just Q1 2025, it processed $56.4 billion in transactions, with nearly half conducted. Will the U.S. revise its policies? Will it dial back financial weaponization to keep allies close? Or will it double down, while the rest of the world quietly shifts toward a new financial order where the dollar is no longer central? The answer won't come from fiery speeches. It will be revealed through real policies, interest rate decisions, investment rules, and how America handles its strategic partners. Because every passing minute, every signal sent, is another dollar, another job, another American savings account being wagered in this unprecedented financial conflict.
$14 billion in just 72 hours. Sounds unbelievable, doesn't it? But that's the price tag the U.S. soybean export industry lost due to a single remark from Donald Trump. Was this the cost of a negotiation strategy or just another reckless political stunt? Donald Trump has reignited the idea of making Canada the 51st state of the U.S., claiming it would benefit Canadians with lower taxes, military protection, and health care. But here's the big question. Would Canadians be willing to trade their self-determination for a US-based welfare system? Immediately, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau slammed the idea, reaffirming that Canada is an independent nation and will protect its sovereignty. His strong response sparked a wave of national unity. Millions of Canadians took to the streets, and social media erupted with messages like, "Number Canada is not for sale." But the question remains, can this neighborly relationship survive such a divisive statement from Trump? Is this just political posturing, or is it something more? Trump's words weren't just political banter. They hit a nerve with Canadians. Protests erupted in major cities like Ottawa and Toronto, where citizens expressed deep concern about losing their unique cultural identity. From hockey festivals to the multicultural values that have been cultivated over decades. But the social unrest didn't stop at protests. It began to affect daily life. In provinces like Ontario, where the automobile industry has strong economic ties with the US, workers and businesses feared the worst. If tensions continue to escalate, they could lose critical job opportunities. Even in the US, border communities like Buffalo, New York, are now facing the prospect of rising living costs, especially as goods from Canada may soon face higher tariffs. So, it begs the question, can people on both sides of the border weather this storm? Canada is a crucial economic partner for the US, supplying 60% of the crude oil and 85% of electricity to states like Michigan and New York. The trade relationship is worth over $1.2 trillion annually, supporting millions of jobs across both nations. But if trade tensions continue to rise, the economic consequences will be far-reaching. A disruption in Canada's oil supply would send gasoline prices soaring in the US, raising transportation costs and food prices, putting pressure on the middle class, and fueling inflation. In Canada, key industries like oil in Alberta and automotive in Ontario could lose billions in revenue, threatening the livelihoods of thousands of workers. This situation isn't just a minor hiccup, it's a major challenge for both economies. Don't get me wrong, Trump's remarks aren't just idle chatter. They're shaking the foundation of US-Canada relations. Economically, any disruption in the USMCA agreement could have a domino effect, causing prices to rise and jobs to be lost. Socially, the notion of a 51st state is sowing division among Canadians, from the country's Indigenous communities to American families who rely on affordable goods. Trump might see this as a negotiating tactic, but the cost may be a loss of trust with a key ally. Canada is a key partner for the US in NATO and the G7, but does America realize that a strong neighbor is more valuable than just adding another state? The future of millions of people now hangs in the balance. And if we're not careful, everything could come crashing down.